we are at that point. Who is the better Ultra? Ultra Super Saiyan Goku and Ultra Final Form Frieza full power. For the first time ever in Dragon Ball Legends history, the developers have decided to drop two Ultras at the same time, bringing us the theme for the part 3 of the 7th anniversary being Frieza Saga. I'm gonna lay out their kits, give you points for their individual value, their team value, talk about the value of their art cards, and I'll also go into the longevity factor, so who I think is going to live the longest. Comment down below who you've got, and if at the end of the video your opinion's changed, let me know. Let's get into this. So this is a standard, as a lot of people don't know the key factors that go into their kits, so I'm going to give you a summary of the major points. I won't read everything. Let's start with Super Saiyan Goku. So the first thing you should know is that he's an element yellow character, and he's also a melee type. Through his main ability, he's able to draw his ultimate arts. He will also destroy the entire enemy hand, meaning all their cards will get destroyed just like that, giving you an opportunity to attack. But if that wasn't bad enough already, he also takes away the enemy's ki, all of it, so 100, making it super hard for the enemy to get overdrive, which you will see continuously in this kit. He has the standard, which is amazing. So on entry, he's able to get a card. He also gets ki. He gets the ability of cover nullification. He's going to protect his hand as well, which is super useful. But something again, he's going to reduce the enemy ki by 30. Like I said, he's making it very hard for the enemy to get overdrive. Something very underrated, and if used effectively, it will come in handy, is when his unique gauge gets consumed after the second time and onwards, he will be able to nullify endurance, which means he could probably take somebody out just off strikes and blasts. He also goes type neutral, which makes him do an amazing amount of damage, but that's only after the second time and onwards. But every time, so the first time and onwards, he gets damage guard if his gauge empties, and he's also going to destroy 2 enemy cards, which is useful. He's a damage stacker, so every time he lands an arts card, he gets 30% damage inflicted. And something special about him, if his allies get hit by enemy arts cards, he will be building up his own damage so that his next blue card can do an insane amount of damage, and it also gives him the chance to activate feint. So it takes 5 arts cards of your allies getting hit by the enemy to build up to 100%, which is the max, so it's 20% every card. But to get the max amount of feint, which is 30%, it takes 6 times, which is 5% every card. So that next blue card is going to nuke. He also builds up his unique gauge, which is nice. Now the main gimmick about him is that he's able to save his allies. It's a thing called KO guard, where if one of his allies die, he will butt in, save them, and they will be able to stay alive. And that also applies for himself, so think of it as a team indestructible. Something cool about it, if the enemy takes out a unit by nullifying their endurance, when Goku saves them, when they come back to life, but technically they stayed alive, they will still have that endurance, so it's as if they never lost it. And it should be noted that his unique gauge is the time type, so it fills up slowly, and once it fills, you get a set amount of buffs, and you can empty it by using a strike or blast, and you're gonna get some other buffs as well. On his strike and blast arts, every time he hits the enemy, he's gonna reduce their ki, again hindering the overdrive. And on his green card, it's an explosive type, so it's easy to start combos with him. But there's nothing else really beyond from that. That's all for Goku. Let's get into Frieza's kit. So now let's get into full power Frieza's kit. Full power Frieza is an element green, and he's range type. On his main ability, he draws his ultimate arts. He's able to fill his unique gauge 100%, and he's going to steal Dragon Balls off of the enemy, meaning that they lose one, but Frieza gains one. On battlefield entry, he gets a card if he has 3 or fewer, and he goes type neutral against the damage he receives, ki of course, and he's also going to reduce the enemy's ki, helping stop that overdrive. But unlike Goku, Frieza only gets the cover nullification on the press of a strike or a blast arts, so he doesn't immediately have it. It doesn't make a big difference, but in some scenarios you might want it straight away. But if anything, it's better to have it when you press a card, because you could stall if you wanted to and still have the full amount of time account it takes. If he's hit by an enemy arts card, he hinders them quite a bit, as he's going to reduce their ki by 10, increase their art cost by 15, making it very expensive to combo, and increase their sub counts by 2, keeping them on the battlefield. Especially if they can't press any cards, it makes it very difficult for the enemy. Now something I should have mentioned earlier is that he has endurance. Endurance on its own is nice, but it's not the end all be all, but it is if he also has buff cancellation, which full power Frieza does have. If the enemy activates a blue card, ultimate art, awakened art, or rising rush, he will cancel the enemy's buffs, and he'll also decrease increase the ally sub count by 10, meaning he could switch out if he wants to, and this can happen 3 times. Now Frieza's unique gauge is an attack type, and the benefit of this attack type gauge is that it helps to fill his active gauge, where he'll be able to use the death beam. If you don't know what it is, it's basically Beast Gohan's special beam cannon. It does slightly less damage, but it can be pressed 2 times in a row, which I'll get into, and you can combo into it, unlike the special beam cannon. But when Frieza's gauge is full, he fills his active gauge 30%, and he's gonna get some damage buffs, HP, ki. But when he uses his active gauge, so the death beam, with a full unique gauge, he will draw 1 card, which allows him to combo. He'll go type neutral completely, and he can nullify endurance through it. Because it's not an art card or a rising rush, those buffs won't get cancelled. And if you don't know how the attack type gauge works, it fills slightly every time you press an art card. Now for the active gauge, it only requires 40% of the gauge to be filled, so you can use the death beam at only 40%. You don't need the full 100. So that means if you have 80%, you can literally use it twice in a row and still combo into it. And it combos everything, which is crazy. The only other thing that should be noted is that his green card is the grab type, and you draw a card from it and it can combo everything. It does have blast armor, so you won't have to worry about using it, but what's nice is that you do heal from immediately pressing it, which means even if you miss, it could save you. But that's all there is pretty much to Frieza's kit. Now we gotta get into discussing who's better, and first we're gonna talk about their individual value. Now for individual value, I think it could go either way, and it's much closer than a lot of you guys might think, and it doesn't matter whether you're a Frieza enjoyer or a Goku enjoyer. The way I look at it, Goku does a lot more damage, but his element is worse for the current meta because there's 2 reds that will cause him a lot of problems: Kaioken Goku and Ultra Perfect Cell, and he doesn't have easy access to getting over them, getting type advantage or anything like that, so it will be a very uphill battle. Whereas for Frieza, he doesn't have to deal with anybody that's purple because purple is such a horrendous element right now. Evo Vegeta is doing nothing, so Frieza is pretty much free to roam. But even though I'd say he does slightly less damage, the damage isn't that much worse, but at the same time Frieza does tank a lot better. Now in an individual sense, they'd only be worrying about themselves, so Frieza has endurance and buff cancellation, but Goku can save himself, so in that sense it can go either way. And you could also make the argument that you can nullify Frieza's endurance, where no matter what, if you're dealing with Goku, he will have to save himself regardless of what you hit him with. So somebody like Cell could get through Frieza, but literally nobody can get through Goku. He's gonna have a second chance on the battlefield. I use their elements for factors right now in the meta, but that's only to show what type of challenges they'd be facing up against. If we're simply regarding their kits, Frieza has better defenses, but it's possible to get through him. Goku has worse defenses, but you won't be getting through him because he has to save himself. So I don't usually do this, but I'm gonna give this category a draw. I really don't think in individual value one beats the other. It's really just depending on who you prefer to use. So you might argue it's safer to use Frieza because he can tank more, and there's only very niche scenarios where somebody will get through his endurance, but there's literally no scenario where you'll get through Goku even though he tanks slightly less. I don't think this should be widely disagreeable. Usually I have a straightforward answer, but the developers have very much so succeeded in building 2 ultras that can be in a sense balanced against each other. But let me know what you guys think about this. Next, we're going to be considering their team values, and there's a lot of ways you can look at this. So first, let me readdress the elements that I brought up earlier. This should be a no diff in regards to elements. Frieza is in a safer boat offensively and defensively. You have MUI Goku, a blue unit, and maybe Saiyan Saga Fiku that can be used, even Revival Frieza. There are blues that need to be dealt with, and Frieza has a good job of doing that in his position where there's also no purples that can deal with him. While Goku being yellow, there's no real threatening purples for him to have an advantage that way, but he's in quite a bind having to deal with the 2 reds, Ultra Perfect Cell and Kaioken Goku. But if we talk about the teams they're on, I would argue that Goku has a wider variety of teams, whereas Frieza has less options of teams. But more doesn't mean better. In that same boat, I would argue that Frieza's best composition is better than Goku's best composition. Having Ultra Perfect Cell on your team who can nullify endurance 24/7, you could also have Super Saiyan Goku on that team if you were leader slotting Cell. You could also put Kaioken on that team if you leader slot Frieza, and you can do all this with Super Saiyan Goku as well. But the way I see it, the buff cancellation supports the whole team, and there's only really one candidate that can break through Frieza, and that would be Perfect Cell because he nullifies endurance permanently. Everybody else is gonna have to deal with the long road, which makes it an uphill battle no matter what when you're fighting Frieza. But with Goku, even though there is one save, if you have a live reliability on your team, which you probably won't in this meta, but let's say you do. That save gets wasted, plus his defense is being slightly worse, more chances of it being wasted, and then you're fighting a regular battle with him, whereas with Frieza, you'd never really be in that situation unless you fought all the way to get his first bar of health down. There's a lot of damages in the meta, Super Saiyan Goku being the best one probably, but you could definitely still go for Kaioken Goku, you could definitely still use MUI Goku, you could definitely use Ultra Perfect Cell, and even this Frieza does a good amount of damage with the addition of his active gauge. Even though I said it doesn't do as much damage as Beast Gohan's Special Beam Cannon, it's still something to be threatened by. So because Super Saiyan Goku's main gimmick is damage, but it's not by a landslide, and then on the defensive end, he's a lot more of a liability to the teams he can be put on, where Frieza, he's going to keep you safe no matter what composition you run him on. I think Frieza easily wins the team composition argument, especially if you add the addition of the elements, how I spoke about them. Frieza is just much safer right now and is going to add more value to your team than Super Saiyan Goku will. Not to say Super Saiyan Goku isn't an amazing asset to any team you'd put him on, but Frieza is easily the winner here when we're doing comparisons about who will give you more value on any team you're on. So now we're going to do a comparison of their arts. We have the ink part into the transition of their full art. So I'm going to split it into two and then give my opinion as a whole. Regarding their ink arts, I'm giving it easily to Frieza. For the most part, their ink art is the same, but when you see the transitions, for example with Frieza's, it goes through Goku's eyes into Frieza and then you get multiple angles of him trying to get to full power. But with Goku, you just have the face off between both of them. He gets a little angry, then you get the visual of Krillin blowing up. But visually, I feel like there's less going on in Goku's one versus Frieza's one, even though they're not much different. But the small difference is when they focus on Frieza versus when they focus on Goku is a lot wider, as Goku didn't do much extra in his ink art, as it just panned over to Krillin getting blown up. So I think for the ink art, it's very easy to pick Frieza, but then if we go to the full art, I think it's very easy to pick Goku here. I think Goku's in a more natural pose in the way that he's going Super Saiyan and he's angry, whereas Frieza, he's a bulky guy, so him stretching out like that doesn't look the best. But I see what they went for. It's very apparent they tried to mirror each other, similar to what we've had in the past with Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta and Omega Shenron, even Gogeta Blue and Vegito Blue. Although I'm siding with the Super Saiyan Goku art for the final, I think you could also pick Frieza's art depending on your preference. But for the ink art, I think there's a lot more effort put into Frieza's side than there was for Goku's side. So again, unfortunately, I think this is one of those cases where I'm gonna have to give a draw, which I don't usually do either, but they clearly tried to mirror each other very well. So that's a factor for why there's not a large difference in this category. But if you're asking me personally, I would take Goku just for the final art, because the ink isn't something that stays on your screen when you're watching the animation. It's just the build up towards it. But I could completely understand if somebody went Frieza's because they're similar in poses and everything anyways. But also to add, I think the yellow is just a lot softer on the eyes, which is something I think most people would agree to. But again, something I don't usually do. I'm giving this category a draw. Now the final category, we're putting them up against each other. We've got their longevity factor. So how long are they going to last? And something I always mention in this category is we can't objectively say who's going to last longer because we don't know what the developers are going to release in the future. Now we're at this point, I can talk about Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta because he's a unit a lot of people didn't think would fall off. But the point to be made here, it's not falling off if the developers drop something for you to get destroyed. That's called getting countered. If you died at the age of 25, God forbid, you did not die of old age, you did not age out, you were simply killed, and that happens to a lot of units in Dragon Ball Legends. So that's why this category isn't concrete, but assuming they don't do that for any of these ultras, I'm going to give my opinion based on that. So I don't think the answer here is actually as clear as it could be, as I could make arguments for both sides. If I wanted to make Frieza the winner, I would argue that because he has endurance and buff cancellation, it's something that has always aged out well in any unit that we've seen in Dragon Ball Legends. It's really something hard to overcome, and because of the current meta units, him having such a nice element, he's pretty much safe to do damage for the long haul. But if I wanted to take Goku instead of Frieza in this category, I would argue that because Frieza has a lack of teams, if his teams fade out, he will also die out as a factor and will just have to be used on other teams as a leader slot option, meaning that he just fade out naturally. Similar to Dragon Ball Daima, where all the units are still very much good if you use them together, but besides from LF Super Saiyan 4 Goku, the other units are somewhat fading out and getting power crept, so Super Saiyan 4 Goku also loses his value. Whereas Goku being a Saiyan, a Son family Saiyan, Saiyan, he's gonna have so much versatility in the game. He's gonna be very easy to be attributed to other teams. Being an Ultra, he's gonna continue to be used as well. Frieza's also an Ultra, but by default, the less popular one. And I definitely do think popularity plays a factor in your longevity. But one thing's for certain, damage will always get power crept. And because Goku's main gimmick is mainly damage, I think he's more likely to fall off earlier than Frieza. I think if you're a good unit, people will always tend to use you, especially if you're a great unit. And both of these are those, but it depends on the source of your greatness. Goku's source of greatness is 100% his damage, where Frieza, he has a lot of things in combination to attribute to that. So given that the popularity doesn't take effect on how he's used in the future, I think he's going to age a lot better than Super Saiyan Goku, and this shouldn't really be a hot take. But I could see if somebody wanted to argue for Super Saiyan Goku, even though I don't agree based on the reasons I've just given now. The green element is just too safe right now. So I think taking Frieza right here is definitely the right option. Ironically though, because purple sucks right now, it's very likely they get a unit in the near future, putting Frieza in danger. But I don't know that, so I'm not going to include that as a factor for this argument. That's going to be the end of the video. Those are the arguments for whether Goku or Frieza is better. As you guys can see, the winner here is Frieza with 2 draws and 2 wins for Frieza. This is quite a big change for Dragon Ball Legends, having Dragon Ball Z characters be more fun and valuable in PvP than the Dragon Ball Super characters. And on top of that, making them control the game, and then leading into a Frieza being better than a Goku in a celebration, that is a huge 180. The developers really trying to make the game better, changing up tags to do certain things is really nice, and I'm hoping they continue to do that, keeping the game balanced while it not feeling too overwhelming. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you haven't already, make sure to press the subscribe button. We're on this grind to 200,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for watching, man. My name's Zakashi, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man.